Hey guys, hey, this is Anne-Marie, AntiHR channel, and I'm going to do a quick video this Friday evening because this has been on my mind for a bit, and I think it's relevant because you're going to run into these types of people in the workplace, and understanding what motivates them will be helpful. Whether you run into them at work or you run into them otherwise, it's important to understand what motivates them. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my thoughts about the whole Shannon Sharpe thing. And my take might be a little bit different than some of the takes you have seen on social media and some of the takes that I have seen on social media. But I'm going to share what my take is in a minute. But hello first from Zimbabwe. I am in Zimbabwe right now. By the time you see this video, I will have left Zimbabwe. I'm only here for 24 hours. I came to see Victoria Falls, which I believe is considered one of the 7th wonders of the world. And even if it's not, a place that I've been very intrigued by for quite some time. And since Zimbabwe is right next door to South Africa, I have wrapped up my 10-day South Africa trip, which was amazing, phenomenal. One of the best trips I've ever taken, and definitely the best trip I've ever taken that I didn't plan myself. I went with Demetria Lucas's See Some World. If you don't know who Demetria Lucas is, you can look her up on Instagram and other social media platforms. She is the person who does the Ratchet and Respectable podcast, and she's very well traveled, and she did a 10-day trip, group trip to Cape Town that I was able to get in on, and it was fabulous. I'm so glad that I did it. I will talk more about it on my Bald Girl Will Travel channel. So if you are interested in hearing more about my thoughts about this trip, make sure you're following me over there, because I'm going to do a live about it very soon. But today I want to talk a little bit about brother Shannon Sharpe. Now, I didn't become aware of Shannon Sharpe until after he had actually retired from the NFL and he was a sportscaster. And I always thought that man was fine as hell. I'm not even going to lie. I always thought he was attractive, a little country, but attractive. But I didn't spend a lot of time following him, paying attention to him. I just thought, oh, nice looking, well-dressed, takes care of his body, fine ex-football player. I briefly dated a football player in my 30s. I won't get into that right here, but I'm not surprised by some of the things just based on the fact that he's an ex-NFL football player. But I'm not trying to besmirch the character of all NFL football players. I'm just saying. And that one was a fine, chocolate, tall, gorgeous man and had all kinds of issues himself. But I digress. Now, this whole thing with Shannon Sharpe and the underage girl. So the underage white girl, because that's a very important qualification. And Shannon Sharpe, I believe, has 3 children, and all of them are by black women. But, you know, when he did the interview with Cat Williams, which I think is what blew him up really big time last year, when Cat Williams did that very freewheeling interview with him. And he had left the ESPN show with Skip Bayless, and I had done some homework about that whole thing and the falling out, whatever. But I came to realize that Shannon Sharpe did not like women, not just that he didn't like black women, which is obvious that he had a preference. I spent some time, looking at him, because, when you think somebody's fine, you're going to go Google and see who they're dating. And I saw that he liked to keep the company of the snow bunnies. And here's the thing. Everybody has a right to their preference. So this is not going to be me bashing black men that want to date and or marry white women. People have a right to pick who they want. Love is love. I do believe that. And as long as someone is not dating someone or marrying someone because of their race or because of some kind of fetish they have, which I think is a thing here, but we're going to get to that in a minute. I'm not going to say that a black man should never be with a white woman, or a black woman should never be with a white man. That is not for me to say, okay? And I'm not going to say that. And I know some of y'all going to still come up in my comments and start bashing people, and you might get blocked. So just watch your words. Watch your words. You have a right to an opinion, but watch your words. Now, the issue for me is that Shannon started doing these series of conversations with Chad Ochocinco. And as I watched those exchanges, it became very clear to me that neither one of them like black women. And neither one of them like women. And I think that's a very important thing. It's not just to me about them not liking black women. I think it came across to me that they didn't hold women in very high regard as a gender, based on just some of the things that they would say. I also watched interviews with Shannon Sharpe and female guests like Monique. What's the other very problematic comedian? Amanda Seales. And I've watched many of his interviews with male guests, and I watched his interview with Kiki Palmer, and I do see a difference, in my opinion, in the way that he talks to men who come on as guests and the way that he talks to women, the way that he interrupts women, the way that he cuts them off, the way that he tries to tell them what they're trying to say, the mansplaining. And it ain't unique to him. But some of the things that he would laugh at, agree with, co-sign with Chad, who I also think is a very problematic person, this is just my personal opinion, said to me, this is not about a man that has a preference for white women. This is about a man that doesn't like women. Now, I am aware that this is a person who was raised by his grandmother, and he talks of his grandmother with a lot of love and esteem, but I don't hear him talk a whole lot about his mother. And I learned a long time ago that to beware of men that have problematic relationships with their mother for whatever reason. I personally believe that a man that does not have a good relationship with his mother cannot have a good, healthy relationship with any other woman. I'm no therapist, but just based on things that I have observed in life, books that I have read, but really my personal life experience in the dating world, I really believe that. And one of the questions I always ask men when I meet them, whether I'm interested romantically in them or otherwise, is I always try to probe their relationship with their mother. And just because somebody loves their grandma who raised them doesn't mean that they might not have rife, difficult feelings about a mother who left them to be raised by their grandmother. So I don't know enough about that to say that that's where it comes from, but I get the strong impression that this is a man that clearly has some, emotional underdevelopment, because he's dealing with a 19, 20-year-old girl. If you listen to the recordings, there's clearly some issues there. But more importantly to me, this is about a man that doesn't like women, that has issues with women, whether they're willing to say so or not. And so as I was reading about, what's going on with him, reading some of the transcripts of some of the recordings that have now been made public, reading the text messages that his attorney released, trying to, counter the allegations brought by the 19 or 20-year-old, or however old she is now, young lady. What stood out to me, my question more was that I think that she's white is the point. And I'm actually really happy that he don't like black women. Because the reality is that if he had done these things with a black woman, nobody would care. I don't think he would even have been put on a leave of absence by ESPN if a black woman was involved, because clearly he has a history already of assault and other problematic interactions with women, the mother of his children. Another white woman I know is also suing him, an ex-girlfriend. But the text messages, the exchanges with the girl, I'm not even judging necessarily the content of the exchanges. I judge his judgment of getting involved with a 19-year-old girl. Yes, she's an adult under the law, but we all know that the emotional development of young women and young men is not what it should be at that age. And so for an adult person of 50-something years old, right? Shannon Sharpe and I are age contemporaries, right? For someone his age to be interacting at an emotional level, much less a sexual level, with a 19 or 20-year-old child, I think is problematic because of the intellectual and emotional power differential, as well as it says something about whether that person, the adult in the room, is emotionally developed in the way that they should be. But I think that men like him, and I can't speak specifically, to him because I don't know him personally, but men that I've observed like him don't like women. And they specifically pick white women because they don't like white women, right? Shannon Sharpe is from the South, right? And there's a whole history one can imagine of a man growing up in the South a black man, where it's constantly messaged that white women are the forbidden fruit, that you're not supposed to go anywhere near them, that terrible things can happen to you if you do. And you get to be very successful. You're making a lot of money. You can now pretty much get any woman you want, black, white, or otherwise. But the prize still remains the thing that you were always told you couldn't have. You add that to the fact that he's often said that black women overlooked him when he was younger, wouldn't date him when he was younger. Even though he managed to have 3 kids with 3 different black women, I think they're with different women, or at least 2 of them are with one person and 1 of them might be with another. So clearly there were black women that paid attention to him, but that's a whole other thing. But he's raised it enough in interviews that I've seen that indicates to me that there's some kind of feelings there. But the reality is that I believe that men like him who do the kinds of things that he has been accused of, and even that is implied in the content of the recordings and the text messages, are men who really need to prove to themselves that they can have the thing that they've often been told that they couldn't have. I know people who have been in relationships with white women and have treated them horribly. And literally the fact that they were white, I believe, was part of why they were so abusive towards them, because they needed to prove something to themselves. It was an ego boost, right? And doing that to a black woman, degrading a black woman and mistreating a black woman in that way wasn't going to give them the ego boost that they were going to get from doing it to the thing or the person, the representation of the thing that you've been told that you can't have. And I'm no psychologist, but I've seen this movie before. And I'm not surprised about how it's about to end for him. I think he's toast in terms of having a broadcast career. I think he's toast. Now, he'd probably keep his YouTube channel. People probably continue, watching him, especially, the men who wish that they could be doing the things that he's doing. They'll probably keep watching him. But I think his career as it has been is probably over, because the reality is that we still live in a country that has white women on a pedestal, and there's certain things you could do to them, but you better do it behind closed doors, and it better not become public, because if it does, it is going to ruin you. And so I do think that he's going to face the accountability and the consequences, and rightly so, I might add, and rightly so. But I do think we need to understand, I know a lot of people are turning this into a narrative about him not liking black women, and honestly, I don't think he likes women, period. And that's not me making any implications about his sexual orientation. There are a lot of men who are very, very heterosexual, and they don't like women. And they mistreat women because they don't like women for whatever reasons, for whatever happened to when they were a kid, in high school, whatever. They don't like women, right? And so I think he might be one of those people. Now, I don't know him personally. I could be wrong. But the things that are alleged in that complaint, and I'm not even assuming that everything in there is true, but now there are recordings that are public. You can listen to them and make what you will of them. I don't necessarily believe that he committed a crime per se, based on what I know so far. I don't believe that, so far I'm not convinced that anyone was coerced to do anything they didn't want to do. But just because someone will let you do something to them doesn't mean that you should. Especially if that person is not at the same emotional and intellectual level as you to necessarily give the level of consent, right? So I think, just because somebody likes something or will let you do something doesn't necessarily mean that you should do it. Everything that you can do, you shouldn't do. So, some of these things become public, and now you have to be accountable for those things. The public gets to think whatever they want to think of it, and you have to face the consequences. And I don't think these things are happening to him because he's a black man. It's just accountability. He made decisions, he made choices, and now he has to be accountable for the choices that he made. And so I think that there are people that you will come into contact in life, in the workplace, as well as in personal interactions. And some of the things you have to understand is you see them do things, say things, behave in certain ways. It's not always that someone doesn't like black women. Sometimes people don't like women, period. And, when someone is happy to do some of the things that is implied in the recordings, especially, as well as the allegations made in the complaint filed by this person, and all these things available on Google. So you can just Google and read the full complaint filed by this person if you wish to do so. You might feel like you need a shower. halfway through or afterwards. But I'm just saying. But you need to realize what motivates. I think sometimes it's important to kind of have an understanding of what motivates people in their actions. And I don't think that this is a person that just dislikes black women. I think this is a person who probably doesn't like women at all, and who probably, the whole point of doing some of these things is that he was doing it to a white woman. It wouldn't hit the same if it were a black woman. And I personally am very happy about that, because I'm glad that this was not done to someone who looks like me. Do I think it should have been done to anyone? If it was coerced? No. But I'm not convinced there's coercion here, right? But like I said, even it wasn't coerced. Just because you can do something doesn't mean you should do it. And sometimes the things that you do reflect what you really think and who you really are as a human being. And if the recordings are any indication, it doesn't seem to me that this is a person who holds women in very high esteem. And this is a person who has a daughter, right? So those are kind of my thoughts about it. I'm sure you guys will fire off in the comments, but I really will not accept the narrative that this is a black man being attacked by the system or any of its foolishness. This is a black man who made choices, and he's being held accountable for those choices now that they have become public. Whether or not he committed a crime, I think, is a discussion of another sort. I am not at all saying that I believe that he committed a crime, right? But I do think that he exercised very bad judgment and that he has to be accountable for it. Let me know what your take is in the comments, and whether you've encountered someone in the workplace who very clearly to you does not like women. Versus, so a lot of times people are like, this person doesn't like black women, this person doesn't like white women. Sometimes people just don't like women, right? And I think this is an instance, and I think there are a lot of men out there, for whatever reason, that feel that way. And they take these things into the workplace, and you have to recognize it, right? Because people can behave in ways that are illegal and biased based on their feelings, right, towards a group, right? And sometimes it's that they don't like black women, but sometimes like they just don't like women. And I think this person sounds like an individual who has issues with women and gets quite a kick out of degrading specifically white women, specifically because they're white, right? I think that's part of the whole point of this. I think it's not something that should be lost in the conversations about this and about what accountability should look like for him. Let me know what you guys think in the comments, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.